The United Nations Special Envoy on Abuse in Conflict has accused Hamas of committing a sexual violence during the 7th of October attacks in Israel, saying there are, quote, reasonable grounds to believe it happened. She made that statement while presenting a report to the UN.
We also found that there are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred during the 7th of October attacks in at least 3 locations. And in most of these incidents, victims were first subjected to rape and then killed. And at least 2 incidents relate to the rape of women's corpses.
However, when quizzed by journalists about these claims of Hamas carrying out a mass campaign of rape, she admitted that she was so far unable to provide any evidence.
Have you met survivors or victims? And you said that some of the bodies were shot or maybe were subject to sexual violence and then they were killed after that. Have you seen these bodies yourself?
I did not meet with any survivors of sexual violence of the 7th of October attacks or its aftermath. We tried, but we received information that a handful of survivors were receiving very specialized trauma treatment and were too traumatized to speak.
The objective of this visit was to gather analysis and analyze, verify allegations. And yet it's not an investigative nature. Then what is the nature of this? These are not investigations?
We looked at sexual violence pretty much in a vacuum. The way an investigation would collect and analyze evidence of such violations and crimes perpetrated, we collected information, which is completely a different threshold. We did not record or preserve information, documentation, and evidence, including interviews, witness testimony, and forensic material. We did not identify those responsible with a view to ensuring that perpetrators of violations are held accountable.
The Grey Zone media outlet carried its own investigation into the Hamas rape claims, ultimately finding no evidence to support them. Its editor-in-chief, Max Blumenthal, believes that the UN envoy is just recycling the Israeli propaganda that's already made its rounds in the Western media.
A trip that has no investigative mandate, in which she was not collecting any evidence. At one point, she said she's not even collecting information. So what was she doing there? She was there to simply validate so many of the claims by Israel that have already been discredited, debunked, and blown out of the water by independent outlets like ours at the Grey Zone and by Israeli media itself. And what Pramila Patten proceeded to do in her press conference under enormous pressure and intensive questioning from members of the media was to dissemble and basically acknowledge that there was no clear and convincing evidence of any systematic sexual assault on October 7th, and that, in fact, she had not even been able to meet with a single victim. Israel hasn't produced a single victim, and that her entire trip was guided, in her own words, by Israeli institutions. So this is not a credible finding. But for Israel's propaganda purposes, Patten achieved her goal. Details of this report do not verify the Israeli propaganda that's featured in the headlines in Western media about Pramila Patten's presentation. And once again, she has said this is not an investigation. She was not collecting evidence. She's produced nothing new here. They're just recycling propaganda that's already been seen in Western media. And what we need is a real independent UN investigation. I was under pressure by Israeli civil society. And what she means is she was under pressure by cutouts of the Israeli government and Israeli intelligence. The UN was under pressure. And that the Israel lobby may have been incentivizing her trip. I mean, that's something we can take away from that kind of statement. So this was a politicized, theatrical visit to Israel in order to deflect the kind of pressure that organization is getting, while Israel has refused to cooperate with the actual UN investigative body that could deliver a thorough, independent investigation into sexual violence on October 7th on the grounds that the experts who comprise that body are anti-Semitic. So Israel's actually refusing to cooperate with a real investigation.
The UN Special Representative did also speak about the mistreatment of Palestinians, which, among other things, included sexual assault.
I was in Ramallah for one day, and we were able to meet with 4 recently released detainees. I did not receive, but I didn't go to gather information. Again, I stress that I did not go to, but I met with them, and I got very disturbing information from them, information about cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment of Palestinians, men and women in detention, also under the administrative detention, including sexual violence in the forms of invasive body searches, threats of rape and prolonged forced nudity. I don't have to go to occupied Palestinian territory to collect or to gather information, because I receive UN verified information.
It does demonstrate a lack of interest in the plight of Palestinian women. And what we're looking at in the Gaza Strip is not just the abuse of Palestinian women who have actually been abducted by Israeli soldiers and subjected to abuse, including at the bare minimum threats of sexual violence. We've even documented this with our local partners at the Gray Zone through interviews with women who've been abducted by Israeli soldiers off the streets. We're talking about the industrial slaughter of Palestinian women. And this is 400 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank since October 7th. So she's not really interested in the obvious, easily documented live stream of abuse of Palestinian women.